Good afternoon, good evening if you're in Asia, and good morning if you're in the US. We're really happy to have our next speaker today for our R744.com live stream. That will be live streamed live on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and obviously R744.com. R744.com is the leading online marketplace for CO2 products and solutions in refrigeration, for chillers also, and obviously for heat pumps. And over the 15 or so years that this website has existed, we've generated, had millions of page views, bringing the industry closer together around CO2. My name is Marc Chasserot. I'm the founder and publisher of R74.com. And today we're going to have a conversation with Panasonic, and in particular with Benjamin Tissot, who is based in Paris. He's a CO2 expert, has been working with CO2 for a number of years in different positions in different companies, and recently, moved about 4 years ago to Panasonic, cooling and heating solutions in Europe, and is working on building up the CO2 business in Europe in particular. So Benjamin, welcome to the live stream.
Hello, Mark. Thank you very much. Thank you for organizing this event.
It's our pleasure. It's going to be interesting to see how people react to this live stream and the focus on CO2 condensing units, because I know that when we see the activity on the marketplace for R744.com, your condensing units are very popular. We know that you're getting a lot of requests, which is good. It's good business, right, for you. So we're happy to help there. So before we kind of talk about the evolution of Panasonic in Europe with these CO2 condensing units, maybe we take a little step back and maybe you could just tell us, for those of us that are not clued up on condensing units, what is a condensing unit? What is the big difference between a CO2 condensing unit and a CO2 rack, for example?
Biggest difference.
What's the biggest difference? What's the advantage? What's the disadvantage? Just for people to understand, to put context to this.
The biggest difference is that when you have a condensing unit, it's directly coming from the shelves directly to the location of the store of the project. So you move it from the carton box. Gas cooler is already integrated. Everything has been designed. So it's like plug and play approach, A rack you can design upon your needs, add one more compressors, remove another one, and it's just like playing a Lego. You have to work with the condensing unit as it has been delivered. So design of the project is very important.
So that's when you decide, that's where you have to really be careful about the size,
about the selection of the unit. And there are different tools also available in the market and from our side as well to ease the selection of the units.
And these condensing units are basically as close as you get to plug and play, right?
Absolutely.
So could anyone just go and buy one at their local distributor and then just try and plug them in if they've got any knowledge of plumbing? Well, is that how crazy? Is that how simple it could be? Or I know that you wouldn't advise that, right? But is that how close we are to having as simple as possible?
Theoretically, yes. Practically, you need to be savvy also in refrigeration. Sure. You need to get a little bit training and to understand how CO2 is working. But this is the philosophy that sustains the development of condensing units and CO2 condensing units, generally speaking. Yes.
And you think that has been key? Do you think the message has gotten across in the market? Because, CO2 condensing units are quite a new phenomenon in Europe. Like 10 years ago, everyone, when you were thinking CO2, it was all about which size of rack you were going to have and how many compressors and so forth. So condensing units, when they came into the market just a few years ago, was kind of, is this really a viable option in Europe? Have you proven that it is possible there are alternative CO2 technologies today that allow end users to choose?
There are.
Do you think?
Yes, there are some. Actually, I think the entire industry proves that it is a reliable, sustainable solution. Either Panasonic, of course, and all the manufacturers. That CO2 is not only dedicated to massive installations, just like in industrial application, or if you talk about the full retail market, just like hypermarkets, It's becoming very popular by convenience stores, or if you consider, of course, organic food stores, because they are open to environmental friendly solutions, demanding them, which is very good.
So they actually, the CO2, the fact that it's got a natural refrigerant matters in this case? Because, you know, sometimes end users just focus on the energy efficiency.
But
Does it matter, the refrigerant in there? Do you see that more and more?
More and more, and not only, let's say, in the so-called niche of organic food, but also by some other players who are really committed to environmental solutions, either in the food retail market or also from industrial companies who demand, and can be a very blocking point to some other suppliers. There is a demand for natural refrigerants. So you must be able to deliver natural refrigerants. Talking about condensing units, it must be CO2. There are more and more clients requesting this. Aldi, for instance, is a good example. Lidl also. There are good examples in the matter.
Okay, so Panasonic has a long history of CO2. If you're thinking of what Panasonic has done in Japan and before Panasonic, even Sanyo, which is now part of Panasonic. So decades of experience with CO2, different applications, you know, whether that's on the heat pumps and essentially on heat pumps, but also now on condensing units. And the condensing unit model in Japan has been a big success. There are literally thousands of stores in Japan alone that have CO2 condensing units, over 5,000. And I'm guessing the majority of those are Panasonic.
14,000 units.
How many?
I would say 14,000.
14,000 units, but that's not 14,000 stores, because you have like about four.
Sometimes you may have 2, 3, or 4,
okay.
but let's say, thanks to the C-store format, that is a preferred format in the Japan market, what the so-called Kombini network and model, it's working. It's perfectly adapted to this kind of solution. Definitely, so, it's very easy. As we said, it's plug and play. So to commission this kind of solutions to Kombinis, it's perfect. Definitely. Okay. Perfect.
So then I guess it was just a matter of time before Panasonic thought, okay, well, why don't we explore other markets with this model? And correct me if I'm wrong, but is it right to assume that Europe after Japan is the market where you've got the biggest focus for CO2 condensing units at this stage?
At this stage, yes. At this stage, yes. Okay. It doesn't mean that we don't move to some other destinations. I'm thinking about Australia and New Zealand, where we are growing, or even some other ventures. But Europe is definitely a core market for Panasonic. Absolutely.
And when did that happen? When did that decision to enter the European market with CO2 condensing units happen for you? When did you as because Panasonic is one of the biggest success stories of natural refrigerants on the globe, right? If you think about the group Panasonic, there's so much going on the refrigeration side. And if you then include Hussmann within that group, right? So, it's a massive enterprise present on all continents. But when did you kind of say, okay, we're going into Europe now, we're going to do this seriously, we're going to do this properly, we see an opportunity to grow market for CO2? When was that decision taken?
I would say 4 to 5 years ago, practically, when we started to commission the first stores in Northern Europe, specifically.
So you started in the Scandinavian countries.
Exactly.
Why?
For different reasons. First of all, when you want to start with not too challenging weather conditions, especially when you start new ventures on new countries, new continent. You need also to identify the right clients who are ready to open their doors to new innovative solutions.
Okay.
And there is also a kind of different mindset in Northern Europe, as you know, with a more concerned about ecological situation, environmental status. So I think it has been a perfect, let's say, like perfect storm, perfect matching between some needs we need to address, and also the fact that some management by Panasonic in Europe decided to import these units, support also from Panasonic Japan to deploy these units also in Europe. So perfect combination, I would say.
So is this where most of your sales have occurred up until now, the Scandinavian region?
It is a very important region, but it is now more balanced all across Europe. Yeah, it's really balanced. Scandinavia is very important for historical reasons. France, Belgium is a very strong axis for us. The UK also, that is UK and Ireland, very good. And I would say Spain and Portugal. A very good
Okay.
success and growing in Italy also. So, this so-called limitation, so-called CO2 equator does not exist practically.
Okay.
We've got many installations in Southern Europe and they're working very fine.
So you've got installations in southern Spain, right? In Andalusia, if I understand correctly.
Exactly. And we talked about this during last ATMO meeting. Yes, correct.
Yeah. So we're Europe's going through a heat wave again.
Yes.
So I feel like it's every month that Europe and America and India even worse and Argentina, everyone's going through a heat wave. Australia too. We're all going through a heat wave. That's probably a sign, right? For those that don't believe in global warming. But assuming you do, this isn't going to get worse. It's going to get worse, right? It's going to become a more regular thing. So these heat waves will test these technologies. So have you had any issues with your CO2 condensing units in Andalusia? Because I mean, that's like 45 to 50 degrees Celsius down there, right? During these heat waves. So it's hot.
I have to say no, because we have measured on the probe up to plus 52 degrees C, and it was working fine. So, but
it didn't have any fault. It still provided the cooling. Obviously, it consumed more energy, but
it is still providing the cooling needs, and that is very important. So you don't face any drop in the cooling performance. Of course, you need to be super savvy and to anticipate as well this challenging conditions when designing the project, probably to oversize a little bit, and also thanks to some components, innovative designs of the condensing units.
When you mean oversize, you mean like larger capacities than what you would really need, just to have some margins for error?
Yeah, sometimes yes, but it needs to be like sort of fine tuning, because if it's too big, you will face different problems in winter times on where the temperature will drop. So yeah, it requires a bit more work, but it's absolutely feasible, definitely.
So the customers that are picking these condensing units literally off the shelf, to simplify, right?
Really.
Like a small convenience store, because that's an obvious market that you're targeting, and there's a need for that, right? How many of these condensing units are you selling on average per convenience store?
I would say between 1 and 2, depending on the size. Generally speaking, you've got a core condensing unit just to be connected to the showcases. And probably to some cold rooms, plus another one for additional cold rooms if there is a need for, or another unit to be connected to some low temperature applications. So to make it simple, sort of big one to mid temp, so for the fresh food, and sometimes a smaller one additional also to mid temp or to the frozen food, to the low temp application. Smaller ones.
And is this your biggest segment right now, the convenience store?
It is more balanced. It used to be, of course, the preferred business channel because it was coming from Japan. So we started to move from, let's say, sort of comfort zone, saying we know this market very well, but the idea is to move to some other sort of applications. So also when you talk about supermarkets, it's possible. You talk about the canteens, the restaurants, but there's also some other applications, just like in industries, for instance, healthcare application as well. That is very interesting. I believe this is one of my favorites.
What do you mean by healthcare applications?
Preservation of some tests, blood banks, or also some healthcare application. We have issued recently a dedicated brochure on marketing brochure on healthcare with a link to a video just to show what we are doing by non-food application. And it's working. It's working very fine, definitely.
So you're going into other application areas, other end use cases now, more and more, as you prove the business case of these solutions, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's my mantra, wherever there is a need for refrigeration, there is room for natural refrigerants. Then after you make the selections, either propane, CO2, and when there is a room for CO2, you say yes, no, but worth studying, definitely.
So are most of your clients, most of your customers in Europe, are they usually new, like new installations, new builds, or are they kind of they're trying to get away from an HFC and they're saying, okay, let's retrofit this and stick in the CO2? What's typically, so how does that balance out?
Both, I would say 65 new, 35 refurbishment. But
Is the
I think
35 growing?
Yes, it's growing. This
Okay.
exactly. I think, you know, we can see like convenience stores just like everywhere. I mean, opening convenience stores the way we have done during the past years, I think it will slow down. I'm just talking also thinking about supermarkets and so on. The biggest market
economy, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you can, I mean, even if you're rich enough, you're not going to enjoy 8 meals a day, right?
No.
So not really. So the market will sooner or later be saturated. The biggest one in the next years will be refurbishment. And there are a lot of old installations everywhere, polluted, installed with HFCs. If you know my position on that.
Yeah. I think we're totally aligned on that one. But I mean, but like, okay, but so you see this as a real market because you're offering a kind of a relatively simple solution to go to market, right?
It is simple, but you have to consider that when you need to install CO2, of course, you need to redesign the piping, new evaporators also in the showcases, reconsidering expansion valves and so on and so on. So you need to start from scratch, but the installation is outdated, of course. So yeah, there's hardly any other solution.
And typically you're out of those 35% that are kind of this growing market of installations that have existed with HFCs. What HFCs have they been using up until now when you then come in and offer a CO2? What are you getting rid of?
4,4A, mainly 134A. And I think in the future we'll see also I start to see some, even if they are not old, with 449, 448.
Wait. So 449 and 448, they're being kicked out by CO2?
Sometimes yes.
Why?
Well, I
these
think
are relatively new, right?
It's relatively new, but I think it's a kind of commitment sometimes when they say, I believe that there will be an issue, or I face some not super happy with the solution as it has been promised. Sometimes you see this also used in refurbishment, but you never know how an installation designed for a 448 will react with 449. We always hear retrofitting is possible. I have my doubts. Acidity level is not the same. So I think it's impacting and damaging. So it happens. Yes, it happens.
Okay. And when you're going in there, and I'm guessing your competitors do the same, it's kind of, what's your pitch? You know, what kind of performance are you promising by going to a CO2 solution? What are you, the obvious advantage on direct emissions, that goes without saying, given the GWP of CO2, but what about the performance? What are you kind of saying to these customers?
Okay, promising.
To not overpromise.
Yeah, that's the deal. We shall not overpromise. First of all, we state that it's a future-proof solution. CO2 is future-proof solution.
It's not going to get banned.
Hardly. 2021, you can find some at cheap price. It's very affordable. 2030, you will get some. So if you consider amortization period of time of an installation, let's say 10 to 12 years. So in 12 years,
that's long.
That's very long, but you can guarantee that in 12 years, you can still find R449. I won't.
Okay, so
I will never.
Okay. So because of the banning or phasing down or phasing out of HFCs and the different blends that are coming out,
phasing
the
down,
argument that CO2 is going to be there, and it's been there since for 100 years, right? In cooling, so it's not going to get banned now, right? So yeah, unless there's some effective lobbying by our HFC friends watching this video right now, but you know.
So hello to the chemical brothers.
Yeah. But you know. I'm sure they're working on that. But point being, so the fail safe, the future-proof solution. But okay, that's not enough. What about the performance?
Energy savings we have measured, or some of our clients have measured, and we also showed in some of our documentation that when we compare annual consumption versus R404A, for instance, the difference with CO2 is in. Well, it can be interesting because energy savings can be up to 17%. 17% in terms of energy savings.
So just 1617, not 60.
No, it's 1617.
Okay, that's still a big number though.
It's still very interesting because if you multiply this kind of ratio by the number of stores you commission here and there, it's quite interesting. And there is also another element we need to keep in mind. In case of leakage, by
Yes.
all the other refrigerants, you need to get rid of the products because they might be contaminated whatsoever. CO2 is used for food preservation. Let's not forget this. If you use dry ice to save the food. So actually what you need to do is to get rid of the dry ice. But I would say that for food preservation, CO2 is a perfect solution. In case of leakage, you don't need to throw everything away. That makes a difference with the other ones.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, all right. Just okay. So you've sold how many of these condensing units in Europe? Are you able to share a rough number since you entered the market in 2017?
Above 2,000, I would say.
Over 2,000.
Over 2,000.
So that's condensing units. That's not
condensing units.
Stores.
Condensing units. We need to consider one thing. In Europe so far, we are specialized in small to mid-size condensing units. What does it mean? It means that we go from 2 horsepower up to 10 horsepower, which means cooling capacity, medium temperatures, so for the fresh food, 16, 17 kilowatt. Okay. So this is what we have today in our portfolio, ready to be delivered right now. Mm-hmm. But out of these units, yes, 2,000 condensing units.
And how many in the last year?
Close to 500, I would say.
Okay, so 25% of that cumulative sales over the last 5-6 years has been in the last year. So I would understand that as it's starting to pick up.
It starts to pick up dramatically.
Why? Why?
There are many good reasons. There are many good reasons for this. I think the first one in Europe, we've got the legal framework. That is very important. The F-gas and also
the current F-gas, not the future one. The current one.
The current one, yes. And people do anticipate the next one. Consider also the REACH regulation that may get rid of the PFAS for good, which is fine.
Okay, but that's still, we're still several years away, best case, from some restrictions on HFOs because of PFAS. But do you think people are still, do your clients, when you talk to them, do they understand that issue?
You need to catch their attention on these points to say in how will you source your refrigerants in a matter of 5 years? Okay. I will never put a single penny on that. So that's the point. The technology has been improved by all the stakeholders. I mean, when you consider the condensing units, generally speaking, the technology has been dramatically improved for good. There is a better expertise in the market, thanks to better promotion, what you are doing, thanks to trainings as well, that are very important. It's easier to source some components. I'm thinking about the evaporators, right? As an example, if you consider just like 4 years ago, getting an 80 bar evaporator was quite difficult. Now it's very easy. You can source like everywhere. You can even get 110 bar for some suppliers. So
the ecosystem is there. The
ecosystem is there. It's growing, and there is a stronger commitment by some distribution companies, some installers as well, and some end users. Definitely, we're openly moving to NATREF, and it's not only greenwashing. I mean, they're really committed to that.
Definitely. And your condensing units, are they assembled in Europe, or are they shipped over from China or Japan?
From Japan. It is still shipped from Japan.
So they're made in Japan and then shipped over here.
Made in Japan by the engineers who designed them, manufactured also the condensing units you can find in Europe. There's more or less the same one. I mean, common trunk by 85%. You need to adapt, of course, to be compliant to the CE regulation. Absolutely fine. Electricity, voltage. But I mean, the people who develop the ones, or the compressor as well, in Japan, are the ones who work on the condensing units. This is why some of the performance we have are very good, because they start from the compressor and they build the unit out of it, trying to get the best out of the compressor.
And most of the components within these condensing units, are they sourced from Japan, or are you working with international suppliers more and more?
More and more, but traditionally, I would say, which is the way we work in Japan, we have a very good ecosystem as well. Yes. We manufacture some of our components also on our side. So
like the compressors.
like the compressors, but not only.
But
And
not
within,
only, yeah.
but within Panasonic, we can find a lot of competences. So we take
Okay.
a lot of
Okay. So
competencies from Panasonic, and we combine.
so it's not an open
together.
ecosystem where you're kind of bringing in local partners, but could that ever happen one day if the market really takes off in Europe and you need to manufacture locally?
Manufacturing locally, I would say. I can't say yes. I can't say no. I don't want to. I don't want to slam.
I don't want to get you in trouble. Sorry.
No, don't get me.
Yeah.
Don't get me in trouble. I would love to get this in Europe. Trust me.
Yeah.
But we need to have we need to get the market, a big enough market to do it. And yeah, let's see what future will bring. But so far from Japan, it's we get excellent products.
So these 500 units sold in the last year, is that on plan, or is that a positive surprise?
Oh, well, mix of both. The surprise was coming from unexpected clients, mainly.
And this is like the healthcare sector?
Yes. Healthcare.
Okay.
I was
special applications.
Some special application. Yes, that's one of the applications. It's super challenging to work there. Trust me. It's. I mean, the one you can see on the video you can find online from a fantastic Canadian company. By the way, it's a Canadian company, and they work excellently well. And this one was not expected as a project, but it's a very nice one. And when you have also the good local partners, they are great projects. But
so you've spent a lot of time developing that local partner network, right? For distribution, for installation and servicing, or is that all still done by Panasonic?
No, we need to rely on local competences. We've got a strong team, a growing one, but you cannot visit each and every site. So you need to rely on good partners. And you need to work with them to build up the trust, the confidence, the training also. And yes, but there are some very good companies in Europe, generally speaking. So we are gifted.
So these 2,000 units sold so far, any big failures?
Not that I know.
Any things that, where you've kind of, we didn't do this right, and lessons learned from that? Any?
It always happens that you say maybe these should have been improved this way or that way, but frankly speaking, out of these units, the failure ratio is ridiculous.
What does ridiculous mean? Like less than 1%? Less than 0.1%?
Okay. It's by far, I would say. When we have some issue, every time there is an issue, you say, wow, this is the end of the world. But when you take a little bit of distance, lucky enough, I am in Europe. So I don't face daily situations or via my colleagues, let's say. When you take a bit of distance, you say, hold on, the failure ratio is less than 0.2. So.
Okay.
And something you can solve rather easily sometimes. So it's of course, when you are facing the issue, you say, how can it be? But when you take a bit of distance, you see that everything is working fine.
Okay.
Generally speaking.
So now you're developing a portfolio in Europe, because in Japan you go up to 80 horsepower, right? You got units up to 80 horsepower. Here in Europe, you're mostly focused on the 2, 4,
and 10.
10, right?
10 for the moment, yes.
Okay. So do you anticipate one day when you're going to have 80 horsepower units being sold in Europe, like you're doing in Japan?
I'd like to, but you know what is going on in some. Okay, we have our home market in Japan, yes, where we are doing everything, addressing the local needs, manufacturing, and so on. So yes, let's say that it's a different. It is still Panasonic, but a different Panasonic approach.
Yep.
Sometimes we design, we commission, we maintain, we do everything. In Europe, we are still sometimes on the, let's say, learning curve. We need to understand how the market is moving. There are some excellent suppliers also of big racks in Europe already existing, well installed, delivering excellent products. The idea is the question is, what sort of difference can we bring? So strengthening the portfolio, this is definitely something we are working on. Absolutely. What sort of applications so far? Difficult to share. We have some ideas, good ones, but we want to sharpen our capabilities. Absolutely. But
So because these 80 horsepower units, that you've actually had an installation in Japan for a cold storage facility. This is an industrial application level.
yes, absolutely.
So wait, I'm thinking, CO2 condensing units for industrial? I mean, most of your competitors would say that will not work from an efficiency point of view. It's just, no. It's, what's your position on that? If you're able to say, because I know that we're presenting that at a conference, our Atmosphere APAC next week in Tokyo on Tuesday. So it'll be interesting to see the data from that first few months. But what's the message you want to communicate? Excuse me.
My colleagues will be able to explain you more because they know about the projects and the design and so on. But let's say the global message is to say there is no limitation. Actually, wherever we can commission, install natural refrigerants, we're going to do it. If you remember, as Panasonic, we communicated that we want to be by 2030 a CO2 company. Doesn't mean that we are not going to use, let's say, our R290 plugins here and there, but let's say the message, the path is very clear. We want to be a CO2 company.
So I'll ask you about that vision thing in a minute, because which part of Panasonic will be CO2?
I'm talking about the refrigeration so far. I'm talking about I can just speak about refrigeration. I can hardly talk on the behalf of my colleagues from other divisions and departments. In refrigeration, yes, we want to be a CO2 company. In Europe,
that's a global thing.
That's a global thing. In Europe, the job is already done, so we are lucky.
Yeah. You started basically with just CO2, right? Or did you not? Did you have? Oh no. I mean, Panasonic's been here for years, but you didn't. You only started selling CO2 condensing in 2017.
Absolutely, CO2 directly.
But all right, so this industrial approach, you're basically saying that you can ramp up and you can have literally. You could line up 10 of these 80 horsepower heat condensing units, and then basically you could target other types of market segments. So this could open up new ways of introducing condensing units to around the world. I mean, I'm thinking US. This would be a massive opportunity in the US, right, for these larger installations, potentially condensing units.
Potentially, yes. You need to talk with my colleagues from Hussmann because they can tell you about the strategy they have. But my opinion on the matter. Wherever there is a need for refrigeration, there is a possibility to install natural refrigerants. So then, after you make the selection, either ammonia, air, hydrocarbons, water, glycol, and CO2.
Okay.
So practically, when there is a need for refrigeration, my first reaction is, let's analyze, let's see. Then after you take a decision, yes or no, for many reasons. But I don't want to slam the door and say it's not for us without even considering the question. So yes, there is no restriction. Out of all the natural refrigerants, you can address all the needs in the refrigeration industry, all of them. So this is what we shall do.
And so this portfolio of different capacities is really part of your strategy to address all those needs and demands, right? And at the same time, making sure that there's the performance behind. And so you've had these installed in Scandinavian countries in extreme cold weather conditions, and also in Southern Europe, Andalusia, the opposing weather conditions, and they work.
And they work, yes. And they work.
So you're proving that CO2 really can apply to the whole of Europe. Right. And I guess these condensing units, they're more modular, right? And they give you a bit more flexibility. What happens if one of them fails? What happens to the others that are installed? If you've got like 2 or 3 of these, how does that work?
There are two options. You go just like in any other condensing unit, you go on site, you analyze, and then you see if it's coming, where the issue is located in the installation, either leakage or whatsoever, if it's coming for the condensing unit. So you replace. So you change the settings, you try to understand, get the spare parts, or if you need to replace, then you remove the condensing unit. In some installations, some clients requested for a backup because they say it's very easy. If I need to switch from one condensing unit to another one, it's very flexible. Let's consider that today we are facing heat waves.
Why do they want a backup? Is that because they're not convinced of the technology yet? And they just want to be sure that they lose all their produce?
it's not a lack of confidence. It's just to make sure, or also a matter of risk management. If you consider hot weather conditions like and heat waves, like we are suffering from right now in Europe. So if you have one enormous big system connected to a hypermarket, you tell yourself, well, if I have a failure there, my entire hypermarket is shut down. Some companies operating supermarkets asked us, and not only us, I want to have a central system, but I want also to have some cold rooms individually connected to independent condensing units.
First of all, that flexibility.
To give the flexibility, and sometimes I don't need this capacity. So I switch off the unit when I need it, I switch on. But just in case I face some failures here and there, I can move everything from one room to the other one, showroom to the cold rooms, and so on and so on. So it's a matter of risk management. But it's
this combination of condensed units and racks is a model that works in more and more cases. And I guess most of your competitors have these kind of solutions, right? They can offer both. I mean, from the major players, all have condensed units now available.
But we can as well, because when
how?
This is so
because you don't sell racks, right? You don't as Panasonic, you don't have that option right now.
No, we don't have the racks, but we still find some ways just to say, what about having some Panasonic condensing units on site? And some clients just say yes. So it's not because it is already the market has been already being commissioned with some other brands that we don't say. Why don't you consider our units?
Okay, and are you finding yourselves competing with R290 options in the market, other natural refrigerant solutions?
I would believe there are more complementary. R290, we still have this limitation of 150 grams per loop for the moment. I think it's very good for plug-in units, sometimes wall-mounted solutions for super small cold rooms. Self-contained cases, I don't believe this is really a competition. Definitely, it's complementary to each other. This is how I see it. And sometimes in some stores, instead of installing cold room, I'm thinking about very small convenience stores, right? Instead of installing condensing unit with CO2 connected to a small cold room, just by a household or a plug-in or R290 plug-in units, you're going to save some money, some time. And also in terms of maintenance, it's going to be easier. I mean, you need to tell the truth to your client and say, you want to buy, okay, my suggestion would be, if you do that, you're going to waste some time, some money, some understanding for strictly nothing. So sometimes it's super flexible to work that way, and some stores are working that way in the background. So this is good. It's complementary.
CO2 and propane.
And propane, yes.
Okay, but there are some players out there, propane players, that will argue that they can go 100% propane stores, and they're proving that. But
yes,
I mean,
they can.
Okay. So I mean, it's good that there's a competition between the natural refrigerants, right?
I think
that's something that Panasonic isn't doing. You're not really pushing the propane fully.
Not in Europe.
Not in Europe. But in Asia, you do it, right?
In some other continents, we need to see what the strategy is. But in Europe, no.
No. Okay.
I can speak on behalf of Europe. But one thing for sure, I don't see other natural solutions as a real competition. Okay. To me, the competition still is from so-called HFC and HFO condensing units like the A2L and so on.
Okay.
This is, to me, the real competition, let's say the dark side of the force.
But, to ask you a provocative question, apologies in advance, but you've got all these lovely refrigeration systems using the CO2, but then the air conditioning in that same store is using an HFC. How do you, and often it could be by Panasonic. How do you handle that internal challenge? Are you having discussions with your air conditioning colleagues to try and get them to move to natural solutions? Is that even part of the conversation, or are we still a little bit too early on that?
It's part of the conversation when I talk with them. Like I said, I am the refrigeration segment.
I know.
It's complicated for me to give a piece of advice to the people who are in charge of natural refrigerants. I can only say that, wow, guys, I'm not an expert in this business, but if you could move to to CO2 in air count, that would be absolutely marvelous. Air to water, I know that there are also some tests with some other solutions, but this is not my core expertise, so I cannot say.
Okay.
If everything would be 100% net ref, I would be super happy, of course.
And do you think that's a possible vision? Because going back to the vision, you want to be CO2 by 2030. I mean, how much of your Panasonic business is CO2 right now in Europe?
In Europe, it's
roughly.
In Europe, a CO2 refrigeration is 100%. We only make in Europe 100% CO2 in refrigeration.
Okay.
No other solutions.
Okay. But you were saying earlier about how by 2030 you want to be 100% natural refrigerants. What were you referring to? Globally.
Globally,
okay,
it's globally.
Okay.
This is the vision of the vision of the group here. This is what we want to be.
Okay.
In Europe, job is done, so I'm happy.
Yeah. All right. So, and there's huge market potential for these solutions. America's an obvious one, and we're starting to see in the US. We just hosted a conference 2 weeks ago in Washington D.C.
Mm-hmm.
and there's a momentum now. The US is moving on naturals, and whether that's CO2 or propane for commercial refrigeration, it's really going to take off finally.
At last.
And that's going to create opportunities for big players as well as small players. And obviously, Panasonic owns Hussmann, and Hussmann's a big player in the US. Yes. And I'm guessing that they're going to be starting to offer your solutions there, right? Like you've done in Europe.
Yes, just like we've done in Europe, but they will deploy their strategy as well in the United States. Yes, but it's great thanks to the new administration. There is a bigger concern about the environmental situation, and that's also, moving to natural refrigerants is a way also just to tackle this situation. Yes, absolutely.
So just to kind of come more to a close for this interview, it's been wide ranging, right? And I put you a little bit on the spot beyond your comfort zone. Sorry for that, Benjamin.
No.
I had to. But
I'm fine with that.
Yeah. No, you can handle it. I'm not worried. You've got thick skin. You have to if you're in the CO2 business, right? Because you're being told time and time again that it can't be done, right? So you've got to be a little bit stubborn.
It's not working. It's not the future. A2L is fantastic. R449, it's great. R448, it's fantastic. This is the future. You're gonna die.
But how do you do? They obviously undercut you on the price, right? So how do you deal with that? Do you just talk about the fact that these solutions might not be around in a few years' time? Yeah, is that the main argument?
That's the argument, but the price of the components is going down. I remember just like a couple of years ago.
Overall, your prices have gone down since you started selling these 5 years ago. Are you seeing a general momentum where you're making these for less and offering them for less?
It's general momentum. And also I remember just like a couple of years ago when you were saying, well, under 100 kilowatt, CO2 does not make the job. Under 50 kilowatt, it doesn't make it. Now I started to hear in some markets, we consider that over 20 kilowatt, I don't see any difference between HFC and CO2 price-wise when considering the installation. So it's going down in terms of size. We are becoming competitive. Of course, right now we are all hammered by inflation, rising in energy costs, or also the raw material. I'm thinking about the copper, for instance. This is changing the situation slightly, but
so in Europe in particular, we're being hit hard by rising energy costs.
Yes.
And you were talking earlier about 16 to 17% being quite a regular occurrence in terms of energy performance improvement to an HFC. Do you see that improving with new innovations in the next few years?
Absolutely. I think some.
Well, what's in the pipeline? What's the cool thing that you can't talk about but is coming and it will make it better? What is it? Is there anything you can tell us?
Well, there are two solutions. the first one we have all heard about has been the ejectors technology that helped a lot also to improve. I'm thinking also about.
But wait, you don't have ejectors in those.
No, because we are
units,
very
right?
small, so we don't need this. It's also playing on some features in the units I cannot really tell about. But one good example would be a heat recovery. If you consider heat recovery in some installations, just to create a kind of virtuous circle, saying I have an excess of heat I can use to get hot water or to heat some other places. That's
one of the big. That's one of the big sales points of CO2, right? A lot of your competitors say it's about the heat recovery. We can do something with that. But what are you doing? And I mean, what would Panasonic be doing with that? Because I'm just trying to think of how you could apply that with your condensing units.
They're very small. That's clear. I think it starts to be interesting from a certain size of unit. If you consider 10 horsepower, just like the one we have, the output is rather limited, but starts to be more or less interesting just to get a bit of domestic hot water. If the plan would be to go over this size, yes, this is something that would be potentially very interesting, because you get the heat almost for free. So otherwise, it's just like lost somewhere somehow. So why not recovering and using it? It's free of charge.
And this is one of those arguments that you're using time and time again.
Yes, this is one of the many arguments we are using when discussing with some clients, existing ones or potential new ones. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So as a final, just looking at some of the questions I'd prepared for you, just making sure I covered everything that I wanted to cover. Yeah. Okay. No, I think we've managed to cover everything. I mean, are there any final comments you wish to share with viewers of this video recording that will be watching this on YouTube in the coming months?
Yes. The only thing I'd like to say is that there is no restriction to natural refrigerants. First of all, you can install everywhere, and you can consider CO2 for any viable installation, small cold rooms to big ones. And of course, if it's coming from Panasonic, it's even better. Absolutely. I need to justify.
You gotta be careful there.
I need to justify my salary. No, but
no, I get it.
But to me, this is very important. This so-called limitation to CO2 does not exist. We've got excellent people working in the industry in Europe. I mean, just like in design, installation. Also, more and more end users start to consider CO2 as a viable solution and long-term future-proof application. So to me, there should not be any limitation to the spread of CO2 as a technology.
No, I think it's good. It's good summary. I think for me, the thing that I learned from this interview is that condensing units offer a viable alternative to the CO2 rack model. And
complementary. It's complementary.
I mean, it depends on the size of the racks and what the target, right? But what we could see potentially is seeing a combination of these condensing units, larger capacities for larger installations, which is something that I would never have thought of, and the 80 horsepower and beyond, right? That's pretty interesting to see where that will go. And that opens up opportunities around the world.
In some installations in Europe on the same site, we have up to 15 condensing units, or in some other ones 12. In some cases 8, up to 8, 10, and it's a viable solution. So if some stakeholders like big names have decided to trust this kind of design, there is a reason for that. So it's
very interesting.
There is no limitation. The way you present it, the way you address the need is of course different, but it's possible. Definitely possible.
Yeah, and it covers all kind of ambience from super cold to super hot. So that is interesting. And of course, you're in a competitive market, so your competitors will come with solutions that will challenge you. and innovate in terms of the performance, which is part of the game, right? When you're competing in an open market. But you sold 2,000 of these. I'm guessing the market's a lot bigger in Europe. You've got a long way to go, right? Which is exciting, no?
It's good. At least there is no reason to get bored in the coming years.
Yeah. All right. So thank you, Benjamin, for talking with us today. And I hope that the viewers will, feel free to leave comments on the YouTube channel. We'll make sure that he gets the comments and questions, and then see you at the next trade show or the next online event somewhere in the world. Okay. So thank you very much.
In real life, I hope.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's about
Thank
time.
you very much.